Man, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of EOS. This is the second interview ever on EOS. This is my dog right here. Go ahead and introduce yourself, bro.
What's up, everybody? I'm TK, aka Twisted Kid. I'm Clearwater, Florida. But right now, I reside in Georgia.
June 3rd, 2019, Twisted Kid introduced himself to the world with a blood-stained story of prison violence. At only 9 years old, he was in Florida's foster care system and was arrested for battery on a staff member. By 13 years old, the Department of Juvenile Justice sentenced him to a program for 9 to 12 months, and because of his behavior, he stayed for the next 14. Released, re-arrested, and re-sentenced to another 11 months, the majority of TK's teenage years had already been spent behind bars and razor wire fences. But TK wasn't finished. He described it as a robbery spree. At only 16, he was sticking up drug dealers and anyone else he could find in Clearwater, Florida. It was during this spree he targeted a pawn shop on a main street, and he robbed it in broad daylight without a mask. Soon after, TK would find himself back in juvie, adjudicated as an adult, and transferred to the Pinellas County Jail on charges of robbery and battery on a person over 65 after he knocked the elderly pawn shop owner to the ground. Surprisingly, the Department of Juvenile Justice recommended TK be sentenced as a juvenile, as he'd endured hardships most adults won't experience in a lifetime. He'd had an extensive mental health history, multiple psychiatric admissions, and struggled in a world that was broken since birth. Because of Florida's sentencing guidelines, at the very least TK was facing just over 2 years in prison and up to 20. The courts denied placing him in a juvenile high-risk program and instead sentenced him to 10 years in Florida State Prison. Entering the corrupt society known as the Florida Department of Corrections, 16-year-old TK was classified as a youth offender, the title given to those under the age of 24, and sent to Florida's JIT camps where razors, locks, and whatever else could be found was used in gladiator-style wars, leaving inmates scarred, mutilated, and at times dead. He'd go through two of Florida's most notorious YO camps, Lancaster and Brevard, before being transferred to adult compounds. It was during this time he'd become a member of the Unforgiven, a Florida prison gang known for its ties to white supremacy. In his 10 years, he'd be stabbed, slashed, fought his way through knife fights, and earned a level of respect from many as his reputation spread. On February 2nd, 2019, he'd be released from prison. It had only been 3 months since his release when he was first seen on YouTube, and 2 months after that, he'd be interviewed by Lockdown 23-1. TK would detail his prison experience with a kitten on his shoulder as he casually spoke of violence, but he captivated an audience and would eventually start his own prison channel. To the outside looking in, he'd be the next one to blow up, but for those that knew him in real life, we all knew a different kind of bomb was ticking. A woman he'd had a brief relationship with tried exposing him, alleging he'd used her for money and was a manipulative, dangerous psychopath. She had screenshots of messages allegedly from TK, detailing his struggle to block out daily suicidal thoughts. What people didn't know was TK had already slit his wrist after he was released. The allegations and screenshots didn't stop. Messages from a now deleted profile read, "I'm on the verge of losing myself. I'm just about to give up. I feel so sapped of strength. I feel empty and cold. I killed one of the kittens." When asked why, he said, "Because I'm losing my fucking mind." The same woman who attempted to expose TK claimed he'd killed the same kitten seen on Lockdown 23-1's interview. She'd go on to say he drowned a second kitten in a bathtub, and in a separate incident, he allegedly pulled up to a woman's house and her pit bull ran at him, so he stabbed the dog in the head, killing it. The rumors became significant enough that he'd addressed them, denying anything about the kittens, telling some on Instagram it was an accident, and saying the pit bull had bit him, so it was self-defense. The only rumors he never addressed was that he beat the woman who owned the dog, and her 16-year-old daughter. TK would post to YouTube periodically before seeming to disappear in what his fans described as him being too real for the internet. He'd moved to Georgia, then back to his birthplace in Tulsa, Oklahoma, shortly after his brother committed suicide. He was living with his sister in what was supposed to be a temporary thing, soon becoming a permanent nightmare. TK would start abusing his sister, destroying her property, and even attacking her boyfriend. At one point, she'd attempt to call 911 when TK held her against a wall with a blowtorch, threatening her. She'd been beaten and left with a broken, now crooked nose, but the violence didn't stop. His sister would take out an order of protection in March of 2021, a second order of protection in April, and 2 days later, TK was arrested. April 15, 2021, a grim mugshot would show TK in the Tulsa County Jail on charges of domestic assault and battery by means likely to produce death, and a second charge for assault and battery. By December, he'd reach a plea agreement. Zachary Henderson, a twisted kid, pled guilty to striking his girlfriend in a manner likely to produce death and striking his sister. His girlfriend testified in court that she had been dating TK and he had hit her upside her face, leaving it swollen and bruised. She underwent surgery to her face. Her broken jaw had to be wired shut, and she was hospitalized for the next 3 days. While TK was in jail, he'd be charged with sexual battery, and part of his guilty plea would reduce sexual battery to a lesser charge of outraging public decency. For that, he was sentenced to 1 year in the Tulsa County Jail, but for beating his girlfriend and striking his sister, he'd receive 20 years in Oklahoma State Prison. Oklahoma being an 85% state, TK will have to serve a minimum sentence of 17 years and will be 45 years old at his earliest release. Now to hear that TK is going to prison, it's crazy because everyone that I interviewed on my channel early on, when my channel was new, it was people I did time with in prison. People wanted confirmation in my stories. People were hearing me use names in my stories like, yo, we want to hear from him, da-da-da. I brought the people on that I did time with. I gave them an opportunity to share their story on my platform in the hopes that they would create a platform. And TK did. I actually created his whole channel for him. But TK is about to do 20 years in prison. Bimba is facing a mandatory life sentence. Red Light is facing a murder charge. Chico Mike, police say it was a suicide. The streets say he got killed. So it's crazy to think that the people that I interviewed, that I've done time with, the majority of them are not free. I'm one of the few that's still free, and one of the only ones that's reached the level of success that I've reached. And it's an eye-opening experience for me, but also for y'all. I didn't bring y'all motherfuckers that weren't living that life. I brought y'all some beasts that were really in prison putting in work. And when it comes to TK, I mean, he went knife to knife with one of my brothers when I was in confinement. One of them had a knife, the other one had an ice pick, and they banged out, and it didn't become a political thing. The gangs didn't get involved. It didn't turn into a war. It was a personal thing that they had, and they went and handled that shit and fucked each other up. But at the end of the day, when me and TK fell out, there was a lot of things playing in the background that people had no idea about, like a lot of the things that were addressed in this video. I've been heard rumors about what he was doing to women. I just didn't put it out there. I've been heard the rumors about animals and about this and about that, and begging everyone for money, begging me for money, begging subscribers for money, to the point that they're messaging me like, what's up with him? This is the third time he's telling me he got to get fucking Uber to probation, and then this female comes along and says he's spending it all on weed money. So many things happen in the background, and through it all, me and others were trying to get him to get help. We saw what he was doing. We heard of what he was doing. We knew what he said he did out of his own mouth, and we repeatedly told him to get help. Get into a program, do something. He even considered coming up to Boston to get into the same program that I was in. It got to a point where he didn't want the help. The ego took over. The little bit of YouTube fame took over and made him forget about everyone that was in his corner, or he just burnt that bridge altogether. And I assumed, you know, knowing what he was going through, something like this was gonna happen. And the only thing I can be happy about is the fact that no one was killed. He has a release date. The girl survived. Obviously, she's gonna be traumatized, but it's just crazy sometimes how things play out. And it gives me more of a reason to really sit and appreciate everything that I got right now. My family, my channel, everybody that's rocking with me, because at the end of the day, the statistics aren't you get out of prison and you become a YouTuber and you become successful. It's that you go back. And one by one, I see that a lot of my friends or people that I call my brothers have gone back or are going back and seem to be stuck. Then it makes it that much more bittersweet almost to be successful, as you see your closest friends stuck in the same situation or in a situation they can't get out of. But hey, that's the reality of living the lifestyle, and this is the reality of the demons that come with it and when you can't control them. It's 1090 Jake. I'm rocking with y'all, y'all rocking with me. Till next time.